Hi, and welcome to ThreatTraq Essentials, where we're going to take a look at some of the everyday cybersecurity lessons that we can learn from this week's ThreatTraq stories. I'm here with Mike Klepper. How you doing, Mike?
Doing well.
Great to have you here. Let's talk about the stories now. Stan brought us a story about a very detailed report that came out about the big Twitter hack that happened over the summer. Tell me in that report, what lessons can we learn?
Really, there are a couple of big takeaways from that. The first is that social engineering is really something that you have to focus and train your users about, but you can't rely on that training. You have to put technical controls in place to make sure that if somebody is socially engineered, the technical controls are going to be able to mitigate that risk, and that ultimately, if you end up with a breach, you should prepare for that by making sure that your non-technical functions are well-versed in their responsibilities. This includes your legal team, your executive level individuals, as well as your PR and marketing organizations.
So really, it's everybody's responsibility to protect an enterprise, but also, should the worst happen, everybody needs to be involved.
That's right.
You had a story about a bad neighbor that may be a little different than what we're used to. It's a different kind of bad neighbor. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so the bad neighbor vulnerability was released by Microsoft, or disclosed by Microsoft here this past week, and can potentially impact enterprises, causing denial of service and blue screen of death kinds of errors inside of your Windows environment. So it'll be important to patch that quickly.
Right?
Yeah, don't want that.
Blue screen of death. Right. So tell me a little more about it.
Ultimately, it's a issue pertaining to some IP version 6 protocol handling, that even if you're not using IP version 6 actively in your network, you could still be vulnerable to it. So you're going to want to deploy that patch or take some mitigating actions as indicated by Microsoft in their documentation.
And that's something we say on the show all the time, which is to patch, and keep all your software and devices updated on a regular basis.
Absolutely. Think of exploits like a key. That key needs a lock to be able to open something up, right? If you take away the locks, then you're in a better situation. So make sure that those issues are getting patched as quickly as practical for your organization.
Now, Manish brought us a story about ransomware that hit an organization with really incredible speed with encrypting their files. Tell me about that.
So this is another great example of the importance of patching. In this particular story, the threat actor group managed to get an initial foothold into an organization through a phishing attack. So that's social engineering, again, coming to the forefront. But then once they were in there, they leveraged a vulnerability called zero login, which was actually disclosed here this August, I believe, by Microsoft, and has patches available for it. But because in this case the organization had not addressed that issue, the threat actors were able to leverage that to quickly escalate permissions, gain control of their entire computing infrastructure, deploy ransomware, and then lock up the entire enterprise. So
what are the lessons we can take away from a story like this? Because it seems like ransomware, this kind of sophistication used to just be done by, advanced persistent threats. But in this case, it's happening a lot, and it's happening to a lot more people than just, large companies or government targets.
Well, in addition to the points we made earlier about social engineering, training people to look out for that, and then, of course, making sure that you're very current on your patching, ultimately, this is an example of criminal groups and persistent, threat actor groups out there following best practices within their business, just like any other enterprise would. So as these nation-state type techniques, these more advanced techniques become more commonplace, threat actor groups are going to improve their ability to execute by embracing those best practices that they've seen be successful out there in their market. If we as defenders of the enterprise are not consistently moving forward, trying to embrace best practices from a defensive perspective, then ultimately that just makes us easier targets and more susceptible to bigger, badder, faster, stronger threat actor groups as they encounter evolutionary lessons facing more advanced enterprises.
Well, thanks a lot, Mike, and thank you all for watching. If you want to keep up on this great advice every week, please like or subscribe below. And if you want to take a deeper dive into any of these stories, click on the playlist below. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.